You know that feeling, right? When you're working on something, maybe a hobby project, maybe something around the house, and you make what seems like a simple fix,
Yeah.
and it just ends up causing a bigger headache down the line.
Oh, absolutely. Happens all the time.
Well, today we're diving into a perfect example of that from the RC car world. It's that really annoying wheel wobble you can get after an upgrade.
Ah, yes. The classic axle gap problem.
Exactly. But this isn't just about RC cars, really. This deep dive gets into a really fundamental engineering idea. You got to understand what a part is meant to do.
Because using it the wrong way, that can lead to hidden damage, stuff you don't see until it's too late.
Right. So you've asked us to dig into the common fixes people try for this wheel wobble, this gap on the axle. You know, using a plastic bushing, maybe a standard steel ball bearing, or even one of those fancy ceramic hybrid bearings, but using them as a spacer, basically.
As a static part to fill the gap.
Yeah. And our mission here is pretty clear. Let's cut through the assumptions and maybe the quick fixes and figure out the real evidence-based solution.
Based on, solid engineering principles and how these materials actually behave under load.
Okay, so let's start there. You swap some parts, you get this gap. Why can't we just crank down on that wheel nut? Just tighten it super hard until the wobble stops? It feels like the obvious thing to do.
It feels intuitive, yeah. But that's where the trouble starts, because it ignores what the parts are designed for. See, a wheel assembly deals with two main kinds of forces. You've got radial loads, that's like the weight of the buggy, or the impact from landing a jump.
Okay, like up and down forces on the wheel.
Exactly, and that's what bearings are built to handle smoothly. But then you have the axial clamping force, that's the squeeze from tightening the nut along the axle.
Ah, the sideways squish.
Precisely, and that's what spacers are designed for. The problem is trying to make one part do the job of the other.
So what happens if you force it? If you really over-tighten that nut onto a bearing to fill the gap?
Well, you risk causing something called brinelling. Basically, you're pressing so hard axially that the balls inside the bearing push into the races, the tracks they run on, and leave permanent little dents.
Ouch. So you're damaging the bearing even if the wheel isn't spinning.
Exactly. Even when it's static, it compromises the bearing's function right away because you forced it to handle a load it wasn't designed for. It's just not meant to be squashed like that.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about the type of force, not just how tight it feels. A subtle thing, but really important. So knowing that, let's look at the candidates people use to fill that gap. First up, the super common plastic bushing. It's light, it's cheap, seems like an easy solution. What's the catch?
The catch is a material science concept called plastic creep. It sounds a bit technical, but it's pretty simple. Even under a constant load, like the clamping force from that nut, which might not even seem like that much pressure, plastic materials will slowly, permanently deform over time. They just sort of squish.
So that plastic bushing you use as a spacer,
Mm-hmm.
it just compresses.
Yeah, over time it compresses permanently. And as it compresses, the clamping force reduces, the wheel gets loose again, and guess what?
The wobble comes back.
The wobble comes back. So that quick fix, it's actually like a slow motion failure waiting to happen. It's just fundamentally not the right material for maintaining that precise preload you need.
All right, so plastic is basically out for this job. That leaves using another bearing as a spacer. What about a standard steel bearing versus, say, a high-end ceramic hybrid?
Well, hold on. Let's be clear. Using any bearing as a static spacer isn't ideal because you still risk that brinelling we talked about if you over-tighten.
Right, because you're still applying that axial clamping force.
Exactly. But if you had to choose between the two for this non-ideal use, the steel bearing is probably the more logical pick. Steel is generally more resistant to just basic compressive deformation than the overall structure of a ceramic hybrid might be in this specific scenario. And crucially, it's way, way cheaper if it does get damaged from being misused this way.
And the ceramic ones.
Ceramic bearings have advantages, definitely. They're lighter, the ceramic balls themselves are incredibly hard, and they often have better seals, like those 2RS rubber seals you see, which are great for keeping dirt out. But they cost a lot more. And while the balls are hard, they can also be more brittle under certain kinds of impact or potentially this kind of misuse clamping load. So for using it as a dumb spacer, steel makes more sense.
Okay. And thinking about over-tightening, what about that really frustrating thing where the nut, especially a nylock nut, just gets completely stuck on the axle threads? You can barely get it off.
Ah, yeah. That's almost certainly thread galling. Some people call it cold welding.
Cold welding?
Yeah. It happens when you have high friction and really high pressure between the metal threads often because you're trying so hard to eliminate that gap by just cranking down the nut. The metal surfaces can essentially start to fuse together at microscopic points.
Yikes.
Yeah, it can ruin both the nut and the axle. But if you use a proper spacer, you don't need that excessive torque to get a secure fit. You just tighten it reasonably.
Which prevents the galling in the first place.
Exactly. The root cause is often trying to compensate for the gap by over-tightening.
Okay, so we've ruled out plastic. We've seen the risks with using bearings as static spacers. What is the actual proper engineered solution for you, the builder, facing this gap?
The definitive answer, the engineering solution. It's a dedicated metal shim or spacer. Simple as that.
Like those little metal washers?
Kind of, but more precise. They're specifically made for taking compressive loads. They come in really precise thicknesses. Tamiya, for example, makes a 5mm shim set, item 53587, with various thicknesses. And here's the critical part. They are designed to only contact the inner race of the adjacent bearing.
So it pushes only on the part of the bearing that's fixed to the axle, not the part that spins with the wheel and the balls themselves.
Precisely. It applies the clamping force correctly through the inner race, preventing brunelling or any other damage to the bearing itself while securely eliminating the gap. It gives you a solid, wobble-free assembly.
That's the structurally sound way to do it.
That's the reliable, engineered approach. No creep, no brunelling risk if tightened correctly, no galling.
Wow. So this whole deep dive really shows how something that looks like a tiny, simple fix in the RC world, or any hobby really, can touch on some pretty complex engineering ideas.
Absolutely.
And the best choice isn't always the most obvious one, or, just grabbing whatever part you happen to have lying around in your toolbox.
It really boils down to respecting the intended function of each component. Always think, what was this part designed to do?
That's the key takeaway. Consider the design intent. So it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other common hacks or quick fixes, maybe in your other hobbies or just things you do around the house, might be unknowingly causing problems down the road?
Using components outside their design envelope.
Yeah, because you're asking them to do a job they just weren't built for. What stands out to you? What have you seen or done where maybe the quick fix wasn't the right fix?